Hey, everybody, you're listening to What Are You Doing in Denmark, the podcast that helps you make Denmark make sense. My name is Derek Hartman, and I've been living in Denmark since 2017, and I am joined today by somebody who is on a very similar timeline. Please welcome back to the show, Mike Walsh, who's joining us once again.
Glad to be back to the show. Always fun to join the pod with you. And yes, I came to Denmark officially 2 months before you did, so I've got a 2-month head start on you as far as life in Denmark.
Wow. So. Well, we'll put those 60 days of
Tell
extra time in Denmark to good use today.
Exactly.
Yes. And we're going to be talking about a topic that I think is seasonally appropriate. And we're going to be talking about tourism, specifically sustainable and ecotourism, and some of the issues that brings up, and things that Denmark, and specifically Copenhagen, is drafting to sort of address the ongoing issues around mass tourism and some of the unsettling feelings people have about tourists and tourism in general.
No, that's appropriate. Tourist season in Copenhagen. I think all of Europe is the same way, but especially right now. So we're recording this in early July. It's kind of funny.
Season,
it's
right?
cucumber season, of course. But it's kind of funny because the locals are gone. They're off on their summer ferry, so they're gone.
So if you're listening to this on the beach, just think of us right now.
Think of us when you're sitting out there. It's 35 degrees.
Yeah.
It's actually beautiful. But yesterday was 20 and poured rain. So
exactly.
There you go.
Yes, I always like to go on holiday when it's miserable here. Like I like being on holiday and looking at the weather back in Denmark and being like,
I'm glad I missed out on that. Like, 100%. Because here's the thing, like this, living in Denmark means that you're dealing with the weather, that you know that winter can last anywhere from the official 3 months to the more realistic 8 to 10 months.
Sure.
So you need to make sure that when it's good here, you want to be here.
Exactly.
Like you want to be when it's 27, 28, you want to be on the harbor, in the water, in the park, drinking wine, enjoying those moments, because we live through Hygge winter so that we can get to the good stuff outside.
Everybody says that, right? And if you go back a couple weeks, Anna and I actually talk about this last week, where we discussed, does summer in Denmark suck or not? And I think, like you say, it kind of comes down to weather, but we do know that so many people flock to Denmark, and specifically Copenhagen, every year. Of course, in the summer, but also, it is nice other times of year.
Absolutely.
Christmas market season, of course. In the fall, it's super nice. But with that mass tourism comes some critique and some worries from locals about what that does to, say, the cost of living or availability of housing. And, of course, the strain that having a lot of tourists does on the local infrastructure and just things like litter and things in the street. So we're going to talk a little bit about what tourism and mass tourism kind of does. We're seeing a lot of things across Europe and really across the world in response to tourism and sort of the negative parts of tourism. And then something that Copenhagen specifically has developed, which is called CopenPay.
Yeah, this is something you were telling me about the other day, and we thought that our listeners would really enjoy hearing this concept and getting into it. So you want to talk more about CopenPay? What is it?
Yeah, so CopenPay basically, and this is something that locals can take advantage of, but of course anybody coming to visit Denmark, maybe if you know somebody, share this episode with them because they'll want to know. But basically it launched in Copenhagen, and it's for 24 different sites and eateries involved. And what they're doing is rewarding those who are visiting that are engaging in some sort of sustainable activity. So it could be rewards for arriving by foot or on bike or on public transport, participating in activities like trash collection, just doing things that are sort of eco or environmentally responsible while they're visiting the city. So it takes place, this is a pilot program that is going to be taking place from July 15th through August 11th. So sort of the peak of tourist season to test out and see if this is something that will have some benefits. But it encourages sustainable tourism through these initiatives, and it's been covered on BBC and NBC News. So it's gotten some traction and some attention worldwide. So I thought, of course, the next thing to do is talk about it on the podcast here, right? But it could potentially be expanded. So yeah, again, from those dates, 24 different locations. It's backed by the tourism board, wonderful Copenhagen, and again, it's aimed to promote sustainable tourism. Which is something that other cities sometimes
absolutely
lack.
I think it's that concept of sustainable tourism, I think, is super interesting.
Well, it's funny because I wouldn't necessarily think of tourism as something or an area that we need to worry about sustainability as much. I mean, sure, I would in some senses, if we're, say hiking to in Peru. What's the
it's like to Machu Picchu,
right? Like,
sure.
I can understand. Sure, we want to make sure that we're not eroding the Andes Mountains along the way and being kind to indigenous people that live there.
Right.
But but in a city like Copenhagen, I'm sometimes like, what do you mean sustainable tourism?
And I think for me, I think of kind of two different pieces of sustainable when we talk about it. I think sustainable, the more normal way we talk about it, which is the environmental impact one. I think obviously it's an important one for as we engage in tourism to do it in a way that is with a sustainable mindset, being conscious of whether it's our carbon footprint, our trash generation, what we're doing with that, being eco-friendly while we engage in the cross-cultural exchanges that are the beauty of tourism in that way. But I think it's also the part of sustainable tourism is sustainable in terms of the city or the location itself. Kind of how do you avoid having cities turn into basically Epcot Center, where nobody actually lives there anymore, or it becomes basically performative because it's not really a city anymore. Kind of how, in some ways, Venice has kind of turned into where it's too expensive for locals to live there anymore. So it ends up essentially being a tourist hub for Mediterranean cruises. So I think having this concept of sustainable tourism from both angles, the ecological side and kind of the human side of it, I think it's a good thing to have on the fore of the mind, even if the trash would have gotten picked up anyways, even if people would have traveled by bike anyways, because it's part of experiencing life in Copenhagen. I think having that on the fore of the mind for tourists is a good thing because there's kind of two ways to be a tourist. There's the tourist where you live like a local. Yeah. And then there's a tourism where you're a plague of locusts coming in and leaving once you have to go back to the cruise ship at 5 p.m.
Sure. No, and I understand. And people are, for some reason, always going to want to travel that second way.
Sure.
It's not something that I particularly like. I've seen, people jumping off a boat and kind of just being herded from one place to the other. Nothing about that is appealing to me. Nope. But of course, it can also be, I've traveled in a group in places that are, I think, a degree of difficulty higher than Copenhagen to get around. I spent a month in India, and I was very happy that I was with a tour group because it is a bit overwhelming.
Absolutely.
I didn't think a lot about sustainability or my
impacting.
Yeah.
Sure. But I think that's always kind of the challenge of travel because you want to be in and of the place that you're visiting.
Right.
Like travel, obviously, there's the more physical part of travel. You want to go to the art museum. You want to go see the things that are out there.
You want to get pickpocketed.
And, that's the other joy is you want to go, stand staring up at the Eiffel Tower while somebody's, picking your pocket.
Exactly.
And I think that's why figuring out how to be a tourist in a way that you can see the things that you want to see, do the things that you want to do, knowing that everything that you do, you're having an impact on as well because your experience is also not the natural thing, because if you're going to sit down and get smørbrød, like, is that what you do on a normal basis?
Right.
And you're not a local who just knows this is what you do.
Or that, like, you shouldn't even bother going to a restaurant in, say, Newhound anyway, because it's not going to be super authentic, and it's going to be more expensive.
Exactly.
And yeah.
But I think it's always the game too is, we like to, travel like a local.
Right.
But obviously it's kind of a bit of a misnomer in there, because if you're in a place for the weekend or even for a week, or hell, even if you're doing kind of a digital nomad, you're going to be in a place for a month or two or whatever else, like there's degrees of locality that you can get to. So you get an experience of it, and maybe you get that coffee shop where you're surrounded by locals. But, I think that's, again, why the concept of sustainable, at least figuring out how you fit in with what's around you.
I think it's valid. And, one thing that I looked at, there's different boxes that you want to check in order to be labeled as a sustainable or an eco-friendly tourist place. So one of these initiatives is that you're impacting the tourists in a mindset or in a way that you'll change their behavior when they go back home. So I think this is sort of an example that would have been under that guise, right? So it's the idea that
it's like an educational element to it.
Exactly, like an educational element. Yeah. So you're not just educating them or inspiring or influencing them through, some elements of Danish culture or art or, something that they can appreciate by, say, going to a museum, but also giving them something in sort of an eco and sustainability mindset that they'll take home with them. Yeah. I guess that's where sometimes I think, like, is this the best way to do it? For example, you're going to pick up litter. That's something that anybody can do back home. But if they weren't doing it back home, why do we really think that somebody will be inspired to pick up litter back in Philadelphia?
Sure.
Our hometown, because they came here and picked up some litter to get, say, a free glass of wine or entry to a museum.
Right.
I'm not particularly convinced that they will be, or that those resources, because somebody is taking money from the tourism budget of the city and giving that to the museum or the restaurant that's participating in this to subsidize the cost of the giveaways, right? So would that be money? Is that money that could be better spent doing something else green with these participating partners?
It's kind of like the concept when you look at, say, charity, where if like you give up time as a volunteer for something, like on a day of service or something like that, that's more for you than whoever you're helping, because you're not a professional at it. Honestly, the best thing you could have done is given those professional people in that charitable organization just money, because 100%. They know how to do it better than how you do. But it's about changing you. It's giving you that mindset of service that maybe makes you more community oriented, that makes you more open-minded, or maybe to make you become a bit of a professional in that way yourself, rather than just that one day of service. It's more about you than about who you're serving, for sure.
Agreed. Like obviously, my background a little bit, but for those listening or watching, I was a teacher in the U.S. and I worked at a school that was a little bit disadvantaged. It was a Title IX school or Title I school, and we would have people come in and volunteer. Sometimes they were sent by corporations and organizations.
Sure.
I had some colleagues that were once like writing something or editing something for Nike, and they were not getting paid to do it, but because Nike like donated something to like our school football team or something,
right?
They were like, oh, they were like, why am I editing copy for a corporation like Nike who can pay somebody to do this? And like, thank you for buying, I don't know, towels for our football team, but like maybe like I could have a new projector in my classroom and you could edit this yourself. I guess that's kind of the thing, like wonderful, but is this the best use?
Exactly. And I think another thing that comes to mind with this too is there's a lot of talk around these different things, whether your certifications and stuff like that. It's a bit of greenwashing on there as well. Of course. That the kind of the cynical view on this one is, oh, it's good for the publicity and everything else, but does it really make a difference on what's happening?
And don't get me wrong, like I think it's great to have people pick up litter, but how much trash is on the street? In Copenhagen, we pay, a pretty high, VAT. We have a lot of things. We pay a lot in scat, and it goes to a very clean street cleaning program. The streets in Copenhagen, people always say when they come here that it's a very clean city, and it is. Yeah. So, I mean, sure, maybe there's some litter. I don't know. It's mostly because seagulls pull it out of the trash cans, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But, maybe that money could go to have more frequent trash pickups. I don't know.
But I think it's also doubling. It also makes sense to do that. I mean, Denmark has a reputation around the globe as being a leader in kind of green programs. I mean, when you think of Denmark, you think about windmills, you think about green energy, and there's kind of a big thing about that sustainable mindset. It's a very Scandinavian, a very Danish mindset. So it also kind of doubles down on the branding.
Right. So this is
what is Denmark.
Exactly.
It's all marketing.
Is this altruism or marketing? Yes, exactly. That's sort of what I'm saying.
Sure. But at the same time, like, it's nice to have kind of the capitalistic side of things at least aligned with altruism rather than in opposition to it. So I'm not, again, it's I think we shouldn't overstate.
So this is like capitalism with a heart.
Kind of. So I think, we shouldn't overstate the benefit of this and be like, oh my God, it's going to be so, but like, it's not a bad thing. It certainly is good to have that mindset.
It's kind of like all the press talking about, and no tea, no shade to the Danish national football team. I think that they are wonderful. But like the big to-do about the men's team.
Equal pay.
Taking equal pay to the women's team. Wonderful. But also like these are some of the highest paid athletes in the world making a shit ton of money on the teams that they play for the rest of the year.
Yes.
And by the way, there were also a lot of things in other industries in Denmark affecting women this summer that maybe were other stories that could have gotten focus that weren't so positive.
Exactly.
I'm wondering, is this something kind of like that?
Kirsten Jackson can handle getting paid the same as the women's team. Yeah.
Sure.
No, I agreed. And again, I think, something I think Denmark is very good at broadly is
drag them. Are you going to drag them?
No, I'm not going to drag them. I mean, look, all of life is marketing. all of life is selling yourself. I think something Denmark does really well is understanding the niche that Denmark is known for. It's known for being kind of a country that's seen as being very equal. It's known as being very on the front foot when it comes to sustainability and ecological concerns and green policies and things like that. And we know that's not always true. And we know that under the headlines is a lot of truth and a lot of reality.
After a weekend city break, there may be other things going on
100%.
On the environmental side, sure.
And so I get it. This is again a bit of smart branding on this, on doubling down on what people expect, because honestly, when people come to Copenhagen, they expect to see what's at the forefront of a sustainable city.
Right.
And they're like, oh my God, you can see the trash incinerator is also a ski slope, and it's pretty to look at with a rock climbing wall. And
it is like the buses run on electric energy.
Exactly.
And same with the metro system. That's driverless, by the way, in 24 hours. Like, these things are very innovative and are something worthy of praise. I'm not taking anything away from those things.
No, I think that's the key on this. I think is realizing that is this a marketing ploy? Yes. Is some good going to come out of this?
Sure.
Some,
But okay, so you're skeptical.
I would say I'm skeptical. I think it's more something where it's like it probably sounds better than it actually is, but at the same time, it's a good conversation to have, especially as we think about other places in Europe where this tourism conversation is getting almost violent in places like in Barcelona and Lisbon, where you have a lot of protests going on now, where the local governments are basically trying to push away tourism, where now we're talking about over-tourism. So this isn't a case where Copenhagen's more like, bring in more tourists. We want to bring more people in. These are cities that say, you know what? No mas.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's sort of another angle. I was wondering if that's a little bit of the PR going on here too, which is wonderful Copenhagen and the tourism boards here in Denmark, perhaps trying to get ahead of seeing what's happening in other cities in Europe and trying to get ahead of that. That backlash to what you just called over tourism. And I do want to just correct one thing you said, which is that the tourism ministries, say in Spain and Portugal, are actually behind these protests. They're not. This is all grassroots things.
Oh, it's locals.
Yeah, so it is local. So just to clarify, these and we'll discuss it in a little bit more detail, but some of these protests, for example, the one in Barcelona where people were squirting tourists with water guns that were just dining at a cafe, which honestly, I've been to Barcelona in July. Squirt me with...
Yeah, you need it.
Yeah,
40 degrees.
Go ahead, please.
Yes,
throw a damn water balloon on me. That's fine, if that's your protest. But those protests were actually condemned by the government. So they are not sponsored by the government. They are not the government's effort. They are condemned by the government, and these are local activists.
Correct. But you can feel the tension there. Because at a governmental level, at a broad level on this, you look at this and you're like, look, tourists bring money.
Yeah.
And I mean, in a place like Spain, tourism is one of the number one industries for the entire country.
Tourism and relative, like the hospitality industry.
Absolutely. And I think this is where the challenge is, which is broadly, tourism brings in a massive amount of money to a place like Spain. But then at the micro level, if you're somebody who's living in Barcelona, that you want to just live in Eixample, now suddenly you're being pushed out because rents are exploding, because apartments are being turned into Airbnbs that are being occupied by either one-week tourists or digital nomads. You have it where things are getting more expensive because now it's not just the touristic places that are raising prices. Now your corner coffee shop where you get your sandwich from, your grocery store, has higher costs because you're competing against tourist dollars that are coming in. I get the tension that's going on here because cities are, for the people that live there, probably more so than for the people that want to visit so they can get that amazing Insta-shot in Sagrada Familia.
No, agreed, 100%. And maybe when they finish Sagrada Familia, that'll drive prices back down. I don't know. But look, this is a thing that is happening in the cities all over the world. It's not unique to Spain. It's not unique to Barcelona. And it's happening in Copenhagen as well. Yeah. This is... there's a housing crisis in basically every major city.
Absolutely.
probably every continent.
Yeah.
Even Antarctica. So it's
damn penguins can't get a bed to sleep
can't get
in.
an igloo. So this is something that I get it. Where do you draw the line? Because obviously, I understand your point of, yes, we don't want Venice to become Epcot Center. But at the same time, like, we remember a couple years ago when nobody could go there and they were suffering.
100%.
And there were all kinds of empty apartments and things like that. So, yes, when you do have a lot of people working in hospitality, how do you square that peg when it's like, I get the over-tourism thing, but the alternative is probably not very nice either.
No, and probably the game on this is, again, you've got to find a way to have it fit in with the almighty dollar, euro, krona, whatever it is. Whether it's, like Venice now has a tax. So if you come in, you have to pay a daily tax as you come in.
Yes.
Almost like congestion pricing for driving in London
and
or something like that.
And New York City. And these things have been going on for decades.
Correct.
Right?
It's the same way
but
that
people still go to London and people still go to New York.
Absolutely.
And you pay hotel taxes around the world
100%.
that are basically designed to do the same thing. Right. You're collecting a tax from the people who are tourists staying, whether they're at staying at the Radisson or they're staying at an Airbnb.
And it probably is, you have to put taxing in there where, if you're doing short-term rentals, it's a different extra fee that you pay so that you can have it so that cost differential at least is something that's going to bring money back into the community to be able to support programs for different people and those different services that are in there. So I think that's just the whole key is to find that balance, which is to bring in the money that you want to bring in that tourism comes with. There's a reason why people want to go to Barcelona. It's an amazing city.
Sure.
There's why people want to come to Copenhagen. It's an amazing city.
Absolutely. And in fairness, those people working in Spain are also getting a 2-3 week holiday as well. And where are they going? Look, I mean, do we want people not to travel, or do we find better ways to do it?
Again, like everything, I think life is a balance. It's the same thing here as finding it. So that's where I do think even having a conversation around sustainable tourism in Copenhagen, I think is a really important thing, because the problem is you get to, if you wait and start talking about it when you're in a crisis type situation, like you're seeing in Spain or Portugal or Italy, then it makes it really difficult, because suddenly you're going to be doing things that are going to be clawing money away that people are used to from the tourism side. It's almost too late.
Look, I think that there's just something going on where everybody's just really mad all the time.
Yes, agreed. We haven't come down from being forced on our couches for 2 years.
So I'm like, okay, so you're an anti-tourism activist in a country and city that benefits immensely from tourism. Where is is the issue that people aren't aware of what tourism does for their local economies? Maybe is that something that people should do a better job? Or if this money is going in, why is that money not being visibly reinvested in the cities? Why isn't that money doing things to provide rent subsidies and rent freezes to local residents, things like that? And where is the legislation to make that possible? Are we going after the tourists when we should be going after the lawmakers?
I mean, I think the main question is, are we mad about the tourists? Or are we mad about other things?
Are we mad because we're poor?
I mean, honestly, yes. I mean, it's the same way that, things like the election in Holland that became very anti-immigrant. A lot of its root cause is the fact that there's a housing crisis, especially in the big cities like Amsterdam and Rotterdam. Right. So is it about the tourists? No, but they're an easy scapegoat for these broader societal challenges, which is
nobody can afford anything.
Nobody can afford a house.
Right.
And in places, it used to be that cities, like, again, compared to U.S., Europe's generally had cities that were more desirable to live in and didn't have the same kind of flight that, say, the U.S. did in the 50s and 60s.
Sure.
But, the big thing is that there still used to be maybe cheaper parts of the city to live in. Well, they don't exist anymore.
Right.
Because that's where people want to go to, because that's the gritty, edgy side of town that you want to go live in, because they have all the hip cafes and bars and coffee shops and stuff.
Yeah, but for a while that was so great and it was celebrated. Like, honestly,
Correct.
I mean, 15 years ago, that was wonderful.
Correct.
Yeah, why do we get so angry now?
Because we want everything. We want it to be as cheap as it was when it was crappy, but at the same time have all the cool amenities that come with it being. We want everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's the challenge is, obviously you can't have everything. So how do you dole out the scarcity? Because
water guns.
I mean, that's not a bad thing when it's 40 degrees out.
Yeah, that's fine.
But I think, again,
throw a snowball at me. Do whatever.
Do whatever you need to cool me down. But again, I think the good thing is you have to have the conversation first, because then you can have the dialogue and then you can start finding solutions. And then hopefully you avoid having cases where people are going to be in Copenhagen one day coming after people with water guns, and they're just trying to enjoy their smørbrød.
They're just trying to pick up trash so they can go get their free smørbrød. Yes.
Hey, you know what? Earn that cup of rosé.
I guess so. A glass of rosé. That's, maybe I would be less. Have a glass of rosé, and maybe you'll calm down.
Maybe it's the logic here is they figure, look, if we get the tourists drunk, no one's going to care.
I don't know.
Maybe.
It's kind of the Danes thing.
Oh, well, see, live like a local.
There you go.
Take a shot.
Exactly. And on that note, I think we've maybe covered this topic in pretty. We haven't really come up to any solutions here, but starting a dialogue was one thing that you suggested, and I guess we've done that now.
To do. Neither of us are experts
Progress.
in this.
No,
exactly.
We're not tourists either, but we have a vested interest in,
of course,
what's happening in this city.
We want to keep
this
Copenhagen
country
wonderful.
Yes, and Denmark wonderful. Yes. So wonderful. Thank you for joining us, Mike, and thank you all for listening and watching. Hi.
Hi.